congratulations for Bad Bones.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Such a good sci-fi mystery. Who doesn't love these sci-fi mysteries themselves out there? So,
nobody.
Right. So let's start with you, Scott. Where the original idea came from for Bad Bones for yourself?
Well, I guess I can't. I mean, I have to include Chris in this just because Chris kind of challenged me to come up with a screenplay, because I showed him a short film that I made after we worked together on a movie here in Alaska. And he's like, oh, that's great. But, I only do features. So I had to sort of think about what I had to work with, because I don't think I had made a feature because I just didn't seem to have the resources to make one. But then I just looked at what I did have, which was a house with a giant crawl space underneath it. And that the story just sort of came from there. I mean, I can't exactly tell you why that specific story, other than, if you had these things to work with, what kind of story would you write? I mean, so.
Well, at least you didn't say it came through a dream or something like that.
No. I mean, clearly there's influenced by other movies that are probably pretty plain, in the movie itself. You probably recognize, certain other movies perhaps, that I had seen and liked or whatever. And so they just sort of, along with the relationship between the two main characters, that's always very important to me as well. Have a good core, the emotional core that your audience can attach to.
Terrific. And Chris, for yourself, looks like Scott, mentioned you in this process of the story. Tell us about how this came about for you.
Yeah, I met Scott. We have like a mutual director friend in Alaska, actually, where Scott lives and where the film was filmed at. And when I met Scott on set, him and I, we clicked pretty well. I think it's because I'm so kind of brash. Scott's like the opposite. So it was kind of, I think that was like part of, I think the draw between us. But yeah, like he said, I'm like, he's like, oh yeah, I have this YouTube channel, and I've made a couple short films. And I'm like, well, what are you waiting for your feature? He goes, you didn't really have an answer. So I said, listen, if you write a feature for me, I'll be in it. I won't charge you too much, and let's see what we could do. And I didn't think he was really going to do it, to be honest with you. But literally like 3 months later, he had like kind of a rough draft for me. Did you send me a rough draft, Scott? I forget, but it was pretty quickly you had something for me.
Yeah, I don't remember what draft it was, but yeah, it was pretty fast. But I was working with 2 other people too, so it wasn't just like I, went into my closet and wrote for 6 weeks. I had help.
Gig, that's the motivation that I give people out here. Get to the lab, I tell them.
or find a crawl space and lock yourself in there, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and that's what was funny about this too, is that he didn't tell me a genre or anything. He was just writing. And when you get to know Scott, he's very, very chill, very kind of like not into blood or gore or cursing or anything like that at all, right? And so I was thinking this was going to be just kind of like just a drama or even maybe a comedy, because Scott has kind of like a dry sense of humor. And then when he sent me this kind of different paranormal sci-fi mystery thing, I was like, who are you? Like, it was so out of the blue. I had no idea.
Scott, what was it absolutely challenging, coming from, the short world to something like this, to a full-length feature?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer is yes, of course, it's more challenging than a short. But I mean, I will say that I had written feature-length screenplays before, and I felt I knew my way around a movie set well enough. I'd worked on features like with Chris, to know the ins and outs and how it worked and how organized you have to be and things like that. But of course, you're never completely, I would say every movie, is its own kind of challenge, and definitely doing your first feature film is a big deal, and it is a lot to undertake, especially when you have a skeleton crew and and a small budget and a limited location. I mean, all those things kind of feed into challenges, of course. But a movie, no matter what the size, is just one big problem to solve. I mean, it's always something, you have to fix or tweak or adapt to immediately, especially like in our case, Chris and Madison, our 2 leads, they were only going to be there for 10 days. So we had to get it in the can no matter what, because I couldn't bring them back.
That is true, because I was going to say Alaska's not just down the street itself. And when some of us think of Alaska, we either think that it's just single guys that live there, either being on the oil rig or fishermen. We never really think that Alaska's film industry material itself.
And there really isn't one here. I mean, Hollywood pulled out, I think, in 2015 when the tax exemptions all left. But there is a community here, and definitely, and I was fortunate enough to find people to work on the movie, and so it's funny you say that, because Anchorage is a city, even though compared to most other states, it's a small town probably, but it does have its perks, especially since I came from living in the bush, like north of the Arctic Circle, where there was just nothing as far as film goes. So this was a breath of fresh air. I was so excited to move to a bigger place so that I could find people like Joe, which is how I met Chris, which is how we worked on this movie. So,
wow. So Chris, what did he dangle for you to go up to Alaska for 10 days?
Not much, honestly. I love working, and I get along really well with Scott, and I was excited. It's kind of like an honor to be one of the leads in someone's first feature. That's kind of like their establishing mark on the industry. So I take it very serious, and it's kind of, like I said, it's kind of an honor to be asked to do that. I also like it when I don't have to audition, so that's a sweet spot for me.
Scott, the house itself is another character. Tell us whose poor man's house did you actually took, commandeered, and demolished?
Oh, well, I still live in the same house. It's this house, and typically, I think Chris might have something to say about this, but normally, when you let a film crew into your house, it's not a good idea because they will destroy it. But I think because I had a limited number of people, and everybody was living there too. Like, I didn't have to provide any off location housing. Chris and I think, the gaffer, the DP, and the sound guy were all in the same room. And then Madison had her own room. But no, it was okay. We actually did pretty good. I mean, the crawl space is pretty beat up, I'll admit, but I set it up to be beat up anyway, because we had to tear a wall down, and you've seen the movie, so you know that scene. We actually built a wall so we could destroy it.
So you guys literally defined that live, work, and play all in one location.
Oh yeah.
Yourself.
Well, yeah. Well, one reason I did that was, again, I was just trying to save as much money as possible, and to house everybody is a big deal. Make sure everybody has a place to sleep and a bathroom and food to eat. And you gotta at least provide that, no matter how small your movie is. So I think we did okay there. Fortunately, I have a very understanding wife who was actually there on set as well and helped with a lot of things that I couldn't do. Like, she would get medicine for the actors, and I think she took care of Madison for a day when she wasn't shooting. They just went off to see the sights and that kind of stuff. So it's very helpful when you have a supportive spouse.
Absolutely. Chris, tell us about getting in the headspace of Russ in a horror thriller sci-fi film like this.
Yeah, it was interesting going into it. Scott and I talked about me even writing a paranormal book, since that's what the actor or the character did. But then I got a little busy, so I wasn't able to do that. But what was funny about the situation is I got sick pretty much the second day I was there, like badly sick, where I couldn't sleep at night. It was constant coughing. And that actually developed the character that you see on screen, this sleep deprived kind of, drugged up on, like, at least me being personally drugged up on all this cough medicine and sleep medicine added to the character, I think, in the idea of like him being kind of lost in his own house and getting in too deep with it. And then the lack of sleep, because, you figure what you're doing to your wife and how kind of gross it is in general too. And yeah, so I think me being sick helped create that. I didn't have to do too much thinking into the character because of it.
Well, then let us bring up this point. I want to ask you about your performance with your co-star in this film, The Apples. I mean, that was quite a performance.
Oh man, it's funny you say that, Gig, because like sometimes people mention that like like negative stuff about my performance, right? Like, you know, you get critics every now and then, right? And like my only rebuttal is, you look at apples for half the movie and you tell me how good you do, okay? You just stare at apples and you give 35 different expressions per apple and then let me know how that goes for you. No, it was, you know, that's the hardest part of acting, is the non-dialogue, realistic reactions, the reactions that like the audience is going to understand or buy, or they would be like, oh, I'd probably be looking at it the same way. Those are all things that are in my head while I'm doing something as silly as like holding up an apple and analyzing it, right? I'm like, what would Gig do if he was looking at this apple? And that's kind of where I go with it. So yeah, they worked really well. They, you know, they were always on time, you know, and didn't complain too much. So it was cool.
Didn't ask for more money.
Didn't ask for more money. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, Scott, I have to credit to you with those apples, that those apples look too perfect in their own way. I mean, they look delicious on screen. And I was like going, gosh, sometimes I wish I go to the supermarket and those apples look as good as the one in Bad Bones there. I mean, that must have been a long time picking. That process, just tell us, the process took like 3-4 days.
Yes, I had to inspect many apples before I selected a precious few. Or I think someone just showed up with a bag of apples. Well, it was one of those.
Now, let's give credit to your real co-star, Chris. Tell us about working alongside Madison in a film like this.
Yeah, Madison, I mean, she's great, right? Like, we auditioned a few actresses that I've worked with in the past. Madison was one of them, and she was available. And we had only worked briefly together on an action film where like we had a small fight scene, but we've had mutual friends over the last couple of years as well. And we just kicked it from that action movie. And then when it was time for Bad Bones, we just became like besties, and it was great on set. And she was so cool because I got her sick as well. And I think a lot of actors in general, not just actresses, if they were sick on set in Alaska in like a shared room, sleeping on the floor, you know, on this type of film, you'd get a very different person, right? Like they'd be like, I want to go, or I need a hotel, or I need space, or, you know, just complain the entire time. She never complained once. She lost her voice. She got up and worked and never complained one time. And so it was great. And then, you know, I think you could see the chemistry on screen between us of just two friends, both in real life and on screen. Yeah, couldn't ask for anything better.
Scott, how was it working with both Chris and Madison in such a small cast in this case?
Well, I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, I'd worked with small casts before, so it was pretty similar to what I experienced before as far as number of people. But clearly, I mean, Madison and Chris are both professionals. I was actually pretty impressed because they did both get sick. And, you know, Chris talks about Madison not complaining. Well, Chris didn't complain either. They were both troopers. And, you know, it's always, I admit it, I was a little concerned, especially with Madison, because her condition got worse, like Chris said. I mean, she lost her voice halfway through the shoot. And I think a lesser actor would have said, you know, I'm not making that much money here, so I've got to go. You know, I've got to go. And that would have ended the whole project right there. But she didn't, you know, and I was impressed that she stuck it out. And she, you know, obviously there were times, and you can sense from your actors when, you know, they're getting a little impatient, things aren't happening, and part of that's because they're not feeling well. And I know there were certain things like I had planned on doing that I sort of didn't push too hard because they were sick. And because I did want to complete the movie more than I wanted it to be, you know, absolutely, you know, perfect, which isn't possible anyway. I mean, filmmaking is all about compromise, especially when you have only 10 days to do things. I mean, you can't really be a stickler. But they were both great, and I appreciated their hard work. And even after the fact, like Madison, you know, Madison moved from California, and I had to find, but because she lost her voice, we had to do some ADR work where you replace her dialogue. And so I had to track somebody down for her to go to in another state so that she could, you know, do that recording. She was, you know, perfectly fine doing that, and went to the place and recorded the dialogue, and it was all great. And I really appreciate actors like that who are so committed to the project, they'll do what they need to do to make sure that it gets done and gets done right. So I was very happy with both of them, especially Chris right there.
that is very fortunate. Could you talk about the filming in the crawl space itself? Because a lot of people don't realize that is not easy, because you're talking about a tight space, the lighting, the shadows, and putting Chris in there. It's probably not the easiest. Or is it a big crawl space? I don't know. I've never been to your house in Alaska.
No, well, you probably, I mean, you can see from the movie, like Chris could stand up. I mean, I'm 6'7" and I can stand up in that space. So we were fortunate that it wasn't like, because when you hear crawl space, you immediately picture someone on their belly, right? Trying to get, wherever. And we had so much room in there. I mean, and I was in there, the DP was in there, and the gaffer, script supervisor, the actor or actors. Actually, I think there was probably only one actor there at a time down there. No, there's a couple times those were both down there, but I don't know, maybe Chris has something to say about that, but I thought it was plenty roomy for everything that we needed to do, really.
There was some head bumping going on with some beams.
That's true.
And the worst for me being down there, though, was because I had such a bad, like, whatever it was, sinus infection, cold, and all you're breathing in is dust all day. And
that fog machine was always running too, wasn't it?
And then the fog juice in the air, to create the haze, and so it was probably making me it took longer to get better because of the crawl space, but it was just that was what we signed up for. We knew we were going to be down there.
And originally, the original idea was the whole movie was going to be in the crawl space. So,
wow.
I'm glad we didn't do that, but that was the original. It's like, yeah, you're in this one space the whole movie. Kind of tropey, but
well, I mean, you did, Chris was sick, and you actually had to climb up and down those crawl space stairs, and I'm amazed hearing this that Chris, you did your own stunt of hopping over a fence too, or is that all acting? I'll have to rewatch that.
Yeah, no, that was the slide under the garage door. The jump over the fence, rolling down the stairs. Like we did it. The push was safe. Like Scott and someone else was behind me catching me, so there wasn't a fall. But I did tumble down like 2 or 3 stairs at the end.
Yeah, it was brief. And actually, we originally were going to catch you. Remember, we actually moved forward in the hallway so you could actually go on your back onto a pad, because you can't tell where the stairs begin. You can just see the open living room, which actually worked a lot better. Then you could commit to the fall versus waiting for somebody to catch you. Or
I do my own stunts, gig. I do my own stunts. I'm all in one actor.
You're a 5-tool actor. I mean, that's that is for certain. Scott, let's talk about the practicals of I want to say, call it goo or pus or whatever it is. Tell us what is that made out of, and who did you in the end got to clean up everything?
Well, the substance that you see on screen is hair conditioner. When it's real. When it's not real, it's because the scene, without giving anything away, where Russ goes to the dumpster and then something happens, that's CGI. That wasn't real. But yeah, the 2 instances where it is real, like the apple, when you see the apple pop, which is in the trailer also, so I'm not giving anything away there. That's a well-constructed practical effect by Eric White, who is also the gaffer. Fun fact, when you see that apple is actually sitting on a road in Arkansas. Meanwhile, the other shot is Chris in Alaska on my curb. So through the magic of editing, it all comes together. But yeah, it was just hair conditioner, which is like the cheapest thing I could find that had a tint to it, because I didn't really want it to be white. I wanted to have a tint, and green kind of plays into some of the colorizing themes and things like that. So that's why we picked that. But yeah, I am glad that you call it pus, because that is kind of what we were going for. So,
well, now I don't know if I want to see my my hair conditioner in the shower anymore after knowing how movie magic actually works.
Hey man, if it looks good, you use it, right? Especially if it doesn't cost much.
Well,
Yeah.
I do have to admit, the best thing about these type of films is that it actually enhances your creativity, and
True.
that's what indie films actually do. There's a big difference between no money or having what $300 million like a Marvel, but that tells us about your skill, Scott, Chris's stunt work, everything. You guys do everything.
Well, I'll just say, speaking of like stunts and stuff, especially on, like I said, a 10-day shoot where you have to get everything in the can, you better protect your actors because you can't have them getting injured. I mean, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because if you want to finish your movie, or you have to hide their injury, I guess, for the rest of the time, but they might not want to be there anymore if they're injured. So.
Terrific.
And, I do want to chime in real quick in the fact that, not to toot my own horn, Gig, but now that you know that exploding apple was not in front of me during that performance, I wasn't looking at anything. I had to use my imagination, Gig, to imagine what an exploding apple would be like. So,
I think you had the real apple though, right? Just not an exploding apple.
Yeah, I think there was something to look at, but
yeah.
Sure. I had to
Hey, at least it wasn't a green screen movie, right? We didn't put you through that.
That's true. So. That's true. That's difficult. Yeah, for sure.
That would have been funny if it was a green screen and you just put an apple on the end of a pole and that's what Chris was looking at the whole time. Now let's talk about the distribution. Tell us about the distribution of the YouTube that you guys actually did, and where else can we actually see a film like this?
Well, you're right. I mean, I did decide. I actually talked to Chris at length about using a traditional distributor, and because I had never, obviously it's my first feature, so I didn't know a whole lot about distribution, but I did a lot of research, watched a lot of videos, talked to real actors, real filmmakers who'd used distribution before, and I wasn't super impressed with what they had to offer. For example, I talked to one distributor who I noticed was licensing content to other YouTube channels, like movie channels on YouTube. Now I have a monetized YouTube channel, so my thought was, why would I give someone else my movie so that they can license it out to another YouTube channel where they're going to split it with YouTube? The channel is going to split it with YouTube, and they're going to split it with the distributor, who's then going to split it with me. That didn't make any sense because I already had a channel that I could use, which is a channel about filmmaking. So, the more I thought about it, the more this is kind of an experiment because, the opposite side of the argument is, well, how much money can you really make on YouTube? And the answer is not a super lot, but it does have its advantages, and it's not the only place it's going to end up. The movie is currently only showing on YouTube, but we are in process with it's kind of another distributor called Film Hub. It's kind of an anti-distributor, actually, where it's a non-contractual site where you upload your content and then they license it out to other platforms that want it, like Tubi, for example. But there's no contracts, there's no negotiations. Plus, they don't do things like a traditional distributor would do, which could be like change the name of your movie, change your artwork, tell you to do things you might not want to do because you've turned your movie over to them or you're going to for a certain amount of time. And that's another thing. I didn't want to lose my movie for 5 to 10 or more years. So, which is another reason why I wanted to keep my budget as low as possible, was because I didn't know. Well, first of all, I thought it's easier to recoup your budget if it's small, obviously, versus a more traditional budget or low budget. So I decided to go this route. And like I said, I talked to Chris a lot, and Chris has worked with other distributors and had, some great advice and information. And ultimately he's going to, come to me since it's my film. But I don't regret it. I mean, we have gotten a lot of attention or a lot of views on YouTube, a decent amount of views. I think it's 140,000 right now, which isn't, spectacular, but it was a lot more than I thought we were going to get. Because one nice thing about YouTube is that it promotes its own material if it likes what you are offering. And YouTube clearly wants to see long form content because I didn't have to do that much other than put it on my channel. I still have somewhat of a following, so they would watch it, but the numbers shot up pretty fast. And then YouTube was promoting it by itself. Like when you would type in free horror movie, my movie was the #1 movie that people would find if they were searching for that. And I had nothing, that had nothing to do with me, you know, even though I had certain terms in my title, certain keywords. So stuff like that, you know, is encouraging, because it can also act as a launch point, or at least get you attention, so that when it does end up on other platforms, people may have heard of it before. Now, the argument is, of course, why would they go to another platform if they can see it on YouTube? But I'm mostly sending it out to, or wanting it to be on other platforms that are ad-based anyway, so it really shouldn't matter where they watch it. But we'll see. I mean, it's all an experiment. But I'm kind of in a special place to do this sort of thing, because I do have a monetized YouTube channel, and not every filmmaker does. But plus, I mean, I also get the side benefit of, oh, I can get more subscribers out of it, or they can look at my other stuff while they're there, or what have you. Plus, I can make videos that, you know, promote the movie itself. Like, oh, here's how we did the exploding apple effect, and here's how you can find actors, and blah, 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 and all referring back to the movie, things like that. So that was my main reason.
Most excellent. Most excellent. And will we have a sequel to Bad Bones when the Bad Apples come
back? That remains to be seen. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I've already actually talked to Chris about some story ideas for that, but to do that, certain people might have to be involved, and I don't know if I can afford them anymore.
Yeah, that I have to agree, Scott. Inflation sure pushed up the price of apples now these days. Yeah. Most excellent. Well, let me wrap things up with both of you here. Could you talk about your upcoming projects, or what you, if you could talk about anything that's actually in development? I'll start with you, Chris.
Yeah, sure. So I have 2 Alaskan films coming out soon that to do with our mutual friend Joe. At least one will come out later this year. And then I have I play a crooked detective in another movie that'll come out early next year called The 4 Points. And yeah, just staying busy. I actually just released a children's book, very different than looking at bad apples all the time, but you know, just staying creative and writing, and so you can look for that. That's called Danny the Dino Explorer.
Most excellent. And for you, Scott, obviously filmmakers never sleep.
Yeah, you know, the 2 guys I wrote this movie with, the idea was that we were going to kind of rotate to the next person, like they were going to write and direct the next movie, and that would be Jared Beck, who was the cinematographer on this movie. We were going to do that like this year, but time constraints have come up for him, so that's kind of getting pushed to next year, which means that now I've got this window this year that I could possibly make a movie, and I just need to, you know, get my act together and write something. The challenge of that would be, it's like I'd have to do it faster and with less money, so it might not happen at all. I don't know, but and I wouldn't be able to fly actors in, you know.
Well, my suggestion for you, Scott, is you just have Chris call you every day. He seems like he could motivate you to get that activity for you.
That script done yet?
We do text almost every day, so I stay on them. Don't worry, Gig. I stay on them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Most excellent. Chris, Scott, hey, thank you very much for this conversation of Bad Bones, looking into the story and in behind the scene moments. And everyone should definitely check out Bad Bones right now, especially on YouTube. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next time.